The crystalline spires of New Aurora glittered in the distance as Lyra Starling guided her transport vessel through the asteroid field. 6 years of flying these treacherous routes had honed her skills to near perfection, every movement precise and calculated. The ship's ancient systems hummed beneath her fingers, responding to her touch in ways that still mystified the Avalonian Engineering Guild. "Approaching checkpoint Delta," she announced into her comm unit, more out of habit than necessity. These solo runs had become routine, ferrying medical supplies between the outer colonies. What no one knew was that each flight brought her closer to understanding the strange connection she shared with the old tech, a connection that would soon change everything. The first warning came as a subtle vibration through the ship's hull. Lyra's fingers tensed on the controls as her scanners lit up with multiple signatures emerging from the asteroid belt's shadows. The sleek, predatory forms of Dracarian interceptors materialized from the darkness, their weapon systems already powered up. "Avalonian vessel," a harsh voice crackled through her comm. "You have entered restricted space. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding." Lyra's mind raced through her options. The transport wasn't built for combat, but she knew these asteroids better than anyone. If she could just reach the Scarlet Nebula, the radiation would mask her signature. She threw the ship into a steep dive, weaving between the massive rocks with practiced precision. The Dracarians pursued, their energy weapons cutting bright paths through space. Lyra's ship shuddered as a glancing blow caught her port side. Warning lights flooded her console, but she pressed on, pushing the ancient vessel to its limits. The nebula's crimson tendrils beckoned ahead, promising sanctuary. Then everything went wrong. A precision shot from the lead interceptor struck her engine core. The ship's systems flickered and died, leaving her drifting in the void. As the Dracarian boarding craft lashed onto her hull, Lyra quickly encrypted her navigation data and activated the emergency beacon. She wouldn't make it easy for them. The boarding party burst through her airlock in a shower of sparks. Towering reptilians in gleaming black armor stormed the bridge, their scaled faces impassive behind crystalline visors. Lyra stood tall, refusing to show fear as their leader approached. "Interesting," the commander hissed, studying her console. "Your neural interface readings are unusual. Take her to the labor camps. Commander Voss will want to study this one personally." The journey to the Dracarian prison world of Terminus felt like a descent into darkness itself. Lyra watched through the transport's viewports as the planet's surface came into view. A sprawling industrial complex of mining operations and processing plants, all powered by prisoner labor. The transport landed in a courtyard surrounded by towering walls of black stone. Processing was a blur of decontamination chambers, identification implants, and harsh voices barking orders. They dressed her in gray prisoner's garb and assigned her to Mining Block 17. It wasn't until she was shoved into the cramped barracks that reality truly set in. "First day's always the worst," a quiet voice said beside her. She turned to find an older man with kind eyes and a face weathered by years of hardship. "I'm Theron. Used to be a xenorchaeologist before they decided our research was too dangerous." "Lyra," she replied, dropping onto the narrow bunk. "What are they mining here?" Theron glanced around before leaning closer. "Artifacts. Ancient tech from civilizations that vanished millennia ago. The Dracarians are obsessed with unlocking their secrets." He studied her thoughtfully. "But you? There's something different about you. I saw them checking your neural readings earlier." Lyra hesitated, then decided to trust him. "I can interface with old tech, not just operate it. Really connect with it. It's like the machines speak to me." Theron's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Unless—" He fell silent as guards passed their cell. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, I'll show you something that might change everything." That night, as Lyra lay on her hard bunk listening to the distant sounds of machinery, she thought about all she had lost. Her freedom, her ship, her life among the stars. But deep inside, something else was growing. A determination that would not be extinguished. Whatever secrets lay buried in these minds, whatever power the Dracarians sought, she would find a way to turn it against them. Dawn on Terminus arrived with the harsh blare of work sirens. Lyra followed the stream of prisoners toward the mine shaft elevators, her muscles already aching from the previous day's labor. Theron fell into step beside her, his expression guarded but determined. The descent into the mines took nearly 20 minutes, the ancient elevator groaning under the weight of 36 prisoners. As they dropped deeper into the planet's crust, Lyra felt it, a familiar resonance that made her implants tingle. Something old waited in the darkness below. "Stay close to me today," Theron whispered as they filed out into the excavation chamber. "Watch for my signal." The work was grueling. Hour after hour, they chipped away at the rock face, searching for artifacts buried in the ancient strata. Dracarian overseers stalked the tunnels, their energy whips crackling with barely contained power. But Lyra noticed something else, the way certain prisoners exchanged subtle glances, how they positioned themselves to block the overseer's view of specific tunnel sections. Near the end of their shift, Theron stumbled against her, sending them both sprawling into a narrow side passage. Before she could speak, he pressed a finger to his lips and pointed to a barely visible seam in the rock wall. As the other prisoners continued their work, creating a screen of bodies, Theron quickly pressed specific points along the seam. The wall slid aside with a whisper, revealing a small chamber bathed in soft blue light. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The room was filled with artifacts, not the broken fragments they usually uncovered, but intact pieces of ancient technology. At the center stood a pedestal bearing what looked like a control interface. "The overseers don't know about this chamber," Theron explained quietly. "We've been hiding discoveries here for months, piecing together the truth. These aren't just random artifacts. They're parts of a vast network, a technology so advanced it might as well be magic. And you, Lyra, you might be the key to understanding it all." Lyra approached the pedestal, drawn by an inexplicable pull. The moment her fingers touched the interface, the entire chamber hummed to life. Symbols flickered across the surfaces of the artifacts, and in her mind, she felt the presence of something vast and ancient stirring to awareness. "Just as I suspected," Theron breathed. "You're a resonant, one of the few beings capable of truly interfacing with the old tech. The Dracarians have been searching for someone like you for centuries." Over the next few weeks, Lyra spent every stolen moment in the hidden chamber, learning to control her abilities. The ancient systems responded to her touch, sharing fragments of knowledge and power. But more importantly, she began to understand the true scope of what was possible. Word spread quietly through the mines. Other prisoners began to seek her out, sharing their own discoveries and skills. A maintenance worker who could bypass security systems, a former tactical officer who knew Dracarian patrol patterns, a young engineer who had been cataloging weaknesses in the prison's infrastructure. They gathered in secret, deep in the forgotten tunnels, planning and preparing. Lyra learned that the resistance had existed for years, waiting for the right moment, the right advantage. Now, with her ability to control the ancient tech, they finally had hope. "We're not just planning a breakout," Theron explained during one clandestine meeting. "The Dracarians' entire empire is built on stolen technology that they barely understand. If we can access the full network, we could bring their whole system crashing down." But their activities didn't go entirely unnoticed. Commander Voss, the facility's director, began to suspect something was amiss. Security patrols increased. Random cell inspections became more frequent. Prisoners who stepped out of line disappeared into the isolation blocks. The resistance adapted. They developed a complex system of signals and codes. Maintenance issues were engineered to cover their tracks. The ancient tech itself seemed to help, causing interference with surveillance systems at crucial moments. Lyra's reputation grew among the prisoners. They saw how she stood up to the overseers, taking punishments meant for weaker inmates. They witnessed her using her abilities to ease their burdens, interfacing with machinery to prevent accidents. She became more than just another prisoner. She became a symbol of defiance. One evening, as she worked with the ancient interface, Lyra made a breakthrough. Hidden in the data streams was a map, not just of Terminus, but of something far larger. A network of connected facilities spanning dozens of worlds, all linked by technology similar to what they'd found in the mines. "This is it," she told Theron, her eyes bright with purpose. "The Dracarians don't just have a prison here. They have an entire network of labor camps across their territory. If we can access the main control systems, we could free them all." Theron finished, understanding dawning on his weathered face. But time was running out. Commander Voss had scheduled a full facility inspection, determined to root out any signs of rebellion. The Resistance would need to act soon, before their window of opportunity closed forever. As Lyra lay in her bunk that night, listening to the hum of the ancient machines far below, she felt the weight of thousands of lives resting on her shoulders. The path ahead was dangerous, perhaps impossible. But as she drifted off to sleep, she smiled, knowing that the art of defiance was not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of preparation, in the careful gathering of allies, in the patient nurturing of hope. The inspection was brutal. Commander Voss's forces tore through the prison complex with methodical precision, searching every corner, questioning every prisoner. But they found nothing. The Resistance had been preparing for this moment for weeks, hiding their traces deep within the ancient tunnels that honeycombed Terminus's crust. Lyra stood at attention as Voss himself stalked past her work detail, his scaled face twisted in frustration. The commander's cybernetic eye whirred as it scanned each prisoner, searching for any sign of deception. When his gaze fell on her, Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in that mechanical stare, a hint of recognition, of suspicion. "This one," Voss growled, pointing at her. "Bring her to my office." The guards marched her through sterile corridors to the administrative sector. Voss's office was a stark chamber dominated by holographic displays, showing every sector of the prison complex. The commander settled behind his desk, studying her with unnerving intensity. "Your neural patterns are unique," he said finally. "Our systems flagged them the moment you arrived. You interface with the old tech in ways that shouldn't be possible." He leaned forward. "Work with us. Help us understand these artifacts, and you could have a place of privilege in the Empire." Lyra met his gaze steadily. "I'm just a pilot," she replied. "The work is hard, but I accept my punishment." Voss's organic eye narrowed. "Do you think me a fool? We know there's organized resistance in the mines. It's only a matter of time before we find your collaborators. Make this easier on yourself." "If there is resistance," Lyra said carefully, "perhaps you should ask why so many would risk everything to oppose you." The commander's cybernetic eye flashed red. "Take her to isolation. Perhaps a few days in the dark will loosen her tongue." The isolation cell was barely large enough to lie down in, its walls designed to dampen all external stimuli. But as Lyra sat in the darkness, she smiled. They didn't understand. The darkness wasn't empty. The ancient systems threaded throughout the facility whispered to her, carrying messages from her allies. Through these hidden channels, she learned that the Resistance was growing faster than ever. Word of her defiance spread through the prison network, inspiring others to join the cause. Even some of the guards, disillusioned with the Empire's cruelty, began passing information to the rebels. On the third day of her isolation, everything changed. The whispers brought urgent news. A supply ship was arriving, carrying a delegation of Imperial inspectors. Among them was someone unexpected. Administrator Kira Voss, the commander's daughter, known throughout the sector for her vocal criticism of the Empire's labor camp system. Theron's message was clear. This was an opportunity they couldn't ignore. The Resistance had sympathizers among the maintenance crews servicing the supply ship. If they could get Lyra aboard during the chaos of the inspection, she might be able to access the vessel's systems and establish a link to the broader prison network. The plan was daring, perhaps suicidal, but they had no choice. Commander Voss was close to discovering their hidden chamber. Once he found it, all their work would be undone. When the guards finally released her from isolation, Lyra was ready. The Resistance had spent her imprisonment preparing, moving their most crucial artifacts to new hiding places, positioning their people for what was to come. The supply ship's arrival threw the facility into carefully orchestrated chaos. As the delegation toured the upper levels, maintenance crews accidentally triggered environmental system malfunctions, forcing evacuations of entire sections. In the confusion, Lyra slipped away from her work detail. She found Administrator Kira Voss alone in a corridor, exactly as planned. The younger Voss was striking. Tall and elegant, with scales that shimmered with an iridescent sheen. But it was her eyes that caught Lyra's attention. They held none of her father's cruelty. "I've been waiting to meet you," Kira said quietly. "My sources tell me you're the one I'm looking for, the one who can prove what's really happening in these camps. Why should I trust you? Because I've spent years building a coalition to oppose the labor camp system. But we need evidence, proof of the Empire's crimes, and of the technology they're trying to control." She held out a small data crystal. "This contains access codes to restricted Imperial networks. Help me expose the truth, and I'll help you free your people." It could be a trap, but Lyra's instincts told her otherwise. She took the crystal, and in that moment, their fates became intertwined. The next few days were a blur of careful preparation. Under the guise of the official inspection, Kira arranged for Lyra to access key systems throughout the facility. Each night, Lyra worked with the ancient interfaces, using Kira's codes to piece together the larger picture. What they discovered was staggering. The labor camps weren't just prison complexes. They were built on top of a vast network of ancient facilities. The Dracarian Empire was using prisoner labor to excavate and experiment with technology they barely understood, technology that could reshape the galaxy itself. But they also found hope. The same network that connected the camps could be used to coordinate their liberation. With Kira's help, the Resistance began reaching out to other facilities, spreading their message of defiance. As Lyra sat in the hidden chamber, surrounded by the soft glow of ancient displays, she felt a profound shift in the air. The whispers of the old tech had changed, growing stronger, more insistent. Something was awakening, not just in the machines, but in the hearts of every prisoner who dared to dream of freedom. The time for hiding was almost over. Soon, they would rise from the ashes of their imprisonment, and the Empire would learn the true cost of its cruelty. The supply ship's departure was scheduled for dawn. Commander Voss stood in his office, watching the first light of Terminus's sun creep across the prison complex. His cybernetic eye whirred continuously, processing the streams of data from the facility's security systems. "Something's wrong," he muttered, studying the patterns of power fluctuations throughout the mines. "These readings don't make sense." He was right. Deep below the surface, Lyra worked at an ancient interface, her fingers dancing across symbols that glowed at her touch. Around her, the hidden chamber hummed with energy as hundreds of artifacts activated in sequence. The Resistance had spent weeks positioning them throughout the facility, creating a web of interconnected power that was about to change everything. "All sections report ready," Theron announced, coordinating with their allies through secure channels. "Administrator Kira has confirmed her people are in position." Lyra nodded, her concentration never wavering from the interface. Through her connection to the ancient systems, she could feel the pulse of every piece of technology in the facility. The Dracarians had built their prison using fragments of old tech they didn't understand, never realizing they were creating the means of their own downfall. "Commander," a guard burst into Voss's office. "We're detecting massive energy signatures in the lower levels. The prisoner work details. They're not responding to commands." Voss slammed his fist on the security console. "Lock down all sectors. No one moves until..." The lights went out. Throughout the facility, ancient systems surged to life. Security doors slammed shut, trapping guards in their stations. Communication networks went dark. And in every cell block, the power dampeners that kept prisoners controlled simply stopped working. Lyra's voice echoed through hidden speakers in every sector. The time has come. For years, they've used us, trapped us, tried to break us, but they never understood what they were really dealing with. This facility isn't their prison anymore. It's ours. The revolution erupted with carefully orchestrated precision. In each sector, trained resistance members led their fellow prisoners in overwhelming the isolated guard posts. Non-lethal weapons, smuggled in piece by piece over months, ensured they could subdue opposition without bloodshed. Commander Voss watched in horror as his security feeds showed sector after sector falling to the prisoners. "Get me a direct line to Imperial Command. We need." The office door opened, revealing Kira. "They can't help you, Father. Not anymore." "You." Voss's cybernetic eye flared with rage. "My own daughter. I gave you every chance to end this peacefully," Kira said sadly. "How many reports did I send about the abuse? How many times did I beg you to reform the system? You left us no choice." In the mines, Lyra guided the ancient technology with an intuition that felt almost like dancing. Power flowed through pathways hidden for millennia, awakening defenses that the Dracarians had never known existed. Force fields sprang up, containing hostile forces while allowing prisoners safe passage to designated gathering points. But it wasn't just about Terminus anymore. Through the supply ship systems, amplified by the ancient network, their signal reached other facilities across the sector. On a dozen worlds, prisoners received instructions, security codes, and hope. "The other camps are responding," Theron reported, his eyes bright with triumph. "Uprisings have begun on Nexus Prime, Helios Station, and Tartarus. The Empire's whole labor system is falling apart." Not everything went smoothly. In some sectors, guards fought back fiercely. The resistance took casualties, each loss a reminder of the price of freedom. But they had planned for this, setting up medical stations and evacuation routes, ensuring that no one would be left behind. As the sun reached its zenith, the supply ship's engines roared to life. Hundreds of freed prisoners boarded in orderly groups, guided by Kira's loyal crew members. They carried with them not just their hopes for freedom, but also carefully selected artifacts, pieces of the ancient technology that would ensure they could defend their liberty. Commander Voss, secured in his own detention cell, watched bitterly as his empire of cruelty crumbled. "You don't understand what you're doing," he spat at Lyra when she came to see him. "The Empire will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy." "No," Lyra replied calmly. "They'll be too busy dealing with uprisings on every prison world in their territory. Your empire was built on suffering. It's time for something new." The last group of prisoners had just boarded when Imperial reinforcements finally arrived. 3 warships dropped out of hyperspace, weapons charged, but Lyra was ready. Standing on the supply ship's bridge, she connected with the ancient tech they'd brought aboard. Energy surged through systems that hadn't been active for thousands of years. A shimmering barrier of pure force enveloped their ship, deflecting the first salvos of Imperial weapons. As the warships moved to surround them, Lyra felt the full power of the ancient network responding to her call. Space itself seemed to twist around them. The supply ship, enhanced by technology its builders could never have imagined, slipped between dimensions that the Imperial sensors couldn't even detect. When they emerged, the warships were far behind, their quarry vanishing into the vast expanse of space. On the bridge, surrounded by her fellow rebels, Lyra allowed herself to smile. They had done it. But this was just the beginning. As their ship headed for the sanctuary they'd prepared in unclaimed space, she could feel the ripples of their victory spreading across the galaxy. The great liberation had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. 6 months after the Great Escape, Haven Colony flourished in a hidden star system far from Imperial space. Built into the side of a vast mountain range, the settlement had grown from a refugee camp into a thriving community. Gardens and greenhouses provided fresh food, while recycled prison uniforms had been transformed into colorful banners that decorated the streets. Lyra stood at the observation deck, watching ships come and go from the bustling spaceport below. Each vessel brought more survivors from other liberated camps, along with supplies and intelligence from their growing network of allies. The resistance had evolved into something larger, a movement dedicated to dismantling the Empire's system of oppression. "The Council is ready for you," Theron said, approaching from behind. The former prisoner had become Haven's chief historian, documenting their journey and studying the ancient artifacts they'd brought with them. "They're eager to hear about the latest developments." The council chamber was a circular room carved directly into the mountain, its walls lined with softly glowing ancient tech that Lyra had helped integrate into the colony systems. Representatives from each liberated facility sat around a grand table, while Kira Voss occupied a seat as their liaison to sympathetic elements within the Empire. "Our network continues to grow," Lyra reported, activating a holographic display that showed the status of their operations across the sector. 3 more camps have been freed in the past month alone. The Empire is struggling to maintain control as more of their own people turn against them. "And what of our ultimate goal?" asked Councillor Rhea, a former resistance leader from Helios Station. "Have we made progress in understanding the ancient network?" Lyra nodded, adjusting the display to show a complex web of interconnected sites. "What we discovered in the prison mines was just the beginning. These facilities form part of something much larger, a system created by a civilization far more advanced than our own. They didn't build it for war or conquest, but to connect worlds and peoples across the galaxy. The Empire perverted that technology," Kira added, her scales shimmering in the soft light. "They tried to use it to build prisons and weapons, but in doing so, they never accessed more than a fraction of its true potential." The discussion continued late into the night as they planned their next moves. The Empire was weakening, its resources stretched thin trying to contain the spreading rebellion. More importantly, its own citizens were beginning to question the system they had long taken for granted. Later, walking through Haven's quiet evening streets, Lyra reflected on how far they had come. Children played freely in community gardens, their laughter a sound that would have been unthinkable in the mines of Terminus. Former prisoners had become teachers, engineers, and leaders, rebuilding their lives while helping others do the same. At the colony's heart stood the archive, a vast library housing both their own records and the growing collection of ancient knowledge they'd recovered. Here, researchers worked to understand the technology that had made their liberation possible, while others documented the stories of those who had suffered under Imperial rule. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up back in my cell," Theron admitted as they entered his research chamber. "But then I see all this." He gestured to the walls covered in star charts and archaeological data. "We're not just surviving anymore, Lyra. We're building something entirely new." The ancient interface in the chamber activated at Lyra's approach, responding to her presence like an old friend. Through it, she could feel the pulse of similar facilities across known space, each one holding pieces of a vast puzzle they were only beginning to understand. "The Empire thought they could control this power," she said, running her fingers across the glowing symbols. "They never realized it was meant to be shared, to bring people together rather than keep them apart." A sudden alert drew their attention. One of their deep space probes had detected something, a massive energy signature at the edge of charted space. As the data streamed in, Lyra's eyes widened in recognition. The pattern matched the ancient tech exactly, but on a scale they had never seen before. "It's a hub," she breathed, studying the readings. "A central nexus for the entire network. If we can reach it, we could restore the system to its original purpose," Theron finished. "Connect worlds that have been isolated for millennia. Share knowledge that's been lost to time." The discovery energized the entire colony. Plans were drawn up, ships prepared, crews assembled. This wasn't just another mission. It was a chance to fundamentally change the course of galactic civilization. As Lyra prepared for the expedition, she visited the memorial garden where they honored those who hadn't lived to see their dream of freedom realized. The evening wind carried the scent of blooming flowers, planted by survivors to remember their lost companions. "We did it," she whispered to the quiet stones. We turned their prison into a gateway to something better. And we're not finished yet. The next morning, standing on the bridge of Haven's flagship, Lyra watched her crew take their stations. Former prisoners worked alongside reformed Imperial citizens, their past divisions forgotten in pursuit of a greater purpose. As the ship lifted off, carrying them toward an uncertain but hopeful future, she felt a profound sense of completion. They had started as captives, become rebels, and emerged as pioneers. The transformation wasn't just personal. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the story of their galaxy. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by the principles of justice and unity that had brought them this far. As Haven Colony faded from view, Lyra smiled. The Empire had tried to break them, never realizing that in doing so, they had forged something unbreakable, a community bound not by chains, but by shared dreams of a better tomorrow.